How you doing?
I'm good. How are you,
I'm
Lily?
doing great. I'm doing great. Thanks so much for being here. You are part of our um, big summit involving all stakeholders, and I know in the dive industry they wouldn't normally include artists, but we do because that's how we roll.
Okay.
So I'm so glad you're here. You are a PADI certified diver. You are an artist. You are a TED Talk. What do you say? A Tech Talk? TED Talk? What? How do you say it when you're a TED Talker? You're a
I got,
presenter?
I don't know. And I think it makes you a Tedster.
A t- you're a TEDster. And you are the founder of the Plastic Pollution Coalition. And I met you just a few months ago back at at the Blue Ocean Film Festival, and you were everywhere. Plastic pollution was covered at the festival. It was really exciting. So I wanted to have you on board because you're such a cool lady and you're doing really cool things. And so here we are. So welcome. Thank you for being
Thank you.
here. And your beautiful, beautiful piece of plastic art in the back. It's just amazing that that's plastic. So I want to talk to you. How did you get involved in plastic art?
Well, I originally was studying painting at UCLA. Well, actually, prior to that, I was a biology major. So I
Ah,
was a biology major at UCLA. I was having a good time with my scientific illustrations for my lab classes. Everyone kept saying, "I think you belong in North Campus. You should really be in the art department." And I kept saying, "No, I can do both." And then at some point, I decided I was going to try and do both. And it was really difficult in the years I was there to do that. And I'm actually jealous because I meet young people all the time who are double majoring or majoring in art at MIT or Caltech. And sometimes I think, oh, maybe I was born in the wrong generation because I didn't have that opportunity. But struggle and challenge is good. And so at some point, I transferred to the art department and have found my life come around full circle, which has been really interesting by studying art and painting, and then originally making collage pieces, which were made out of brown paper bags that I was cutting up and sewing back together. Well, gluing them originally, and then I started using a needle and thread as a kind of drawing element. At some point, after working with that material for a couple years, I added a piece of a plastic bag I had found in Belgium, which had a botanical image of a plant printed on it and the Latin name. And I thought there was this really wonderful irony in printing the image of a plant or a tree. And it also made me remember that originally, when plastic bags were first introduced, probably in the 80s in supermarkets in the United States, part of the idea was that you were saving a tree by using a plastic bag.
I forgot that.
So it's so interesting because when I originally started working with plastic bags as a material, I didn't know any of the things that I know now about plastic, and I was really working with the material because, well, I'm sitting in my studio right now looking at other big pieces, pieces that I've made over the years. I've been working with the material for 25 years, and I really initially approached it because it's so colorful and it has all these different fonts and texts printed on it, and it comes in so many different colors, and it was in a way reminded me of making something with watercolors, but also oil paints at the same time, because some of the bags are opaque and some are transparent and translucent, so you could mix colors in a way. And I also found that I could combine different language that I found on the bags. So one of the first pieces I made was a piece. It's more resonant, in my opinion, in my memory now. But when I made it, it just was called Disposable Sin. And that's all that it said in it in terms of language, and it was colors. Um, and I really do feel at this point that plastic bags are disposable sin because plastic is this incredibly useful material, and I feel that when we design things with intended obsolescence in mind, single use, disposable ideas in mind, in other words, to use it for a very short amount of time, we are treating a valuable material in an irresponsible way. And so that brings us back around to design and back around to artists and how artists think about things like this when we design packaging and products, et cetera. So it's been a very interesting uh, journey so far. And also, just on a personal level, the chemicals that are used to make plastics, which are called plasticizers, but they include groups of chemicals called phthalates or bisphenols. You might have heard, oh, this is BPA free. Well, if it's BPA free, they're using BPD or BPZ or another bisphenol, and it turns out those are equally bad, if not worse, than BPA. Those chemicals, and also flame retardants and other chemicals which are used in conjunction with plastics, but particularly phthalates and bisphenols, which are used in the lining of our canned foods in the United States and in many parts of the world, also used to make plastic, whether it's petroleum-based plastic or plant-based plastic, used to make it transparent, translucent, supple, malleable, shapeable. Those chemicals have now been identified as endocrine disruptors. And there are scientists who are now referring to some of them as obesogens because they've been linked to obesity and diabetes, lower sexual function, sterility and infertility, and they've also been linked to breast cancer, brain cancer, and prostate cancer. And my mom died, she was diagnosed when I was about 13 with breast cancer, and she died when I was 17 because it had metastasized in her body. And at the time, they said she has a kind of cancer which is estrogen receptive. So basically what we're doing by eating and drinking all of our food and packaging all of our food in plastics is we are dosing ourselves every day with minute low levels of these chemicals that are known to be endocrine disruptors, and they are known to feed dozens of human illnesses. And we basically have created a disaster. And the kind of the biggest problem about it is people don't know about it at all. And I feel really lucky to have had any of the realizations that I've had, and a lot of them come from having a relationship with the ocean. I grew up in California, in Southern California. I've spent a lot of time and a lot of days in the Pacific Ocean. I'm an eternally aspiring longboarder. I started surfing when I was 30.
Good for you. That's great.
I wish all the guys that I used to go to the beach with would go out surfing and who'd hand me the camera and the dog and the boombox had said to me, "This is really easy, you should come try it." But they didn't. So I started surfing when I was 30, and I also love body surfing, snorkeling, and obviously I love diving, and I've had some really extraordinary diving experiences. And I mean, I'm happy to talk about those as well if you want to, but I've had some extraordinary diving experiences, and I think there's nothing like having the opportunity to go dive literally anywhere in the world, whether you see nothing because you're in a place where there was a hurricane and they've only got like one tiny little fluorescent nudibranch that's sailing by you to freak out on how beautiful that is, or be in the outer Great Barrier Reef in Australia, or in the Garden of the Queen off the southern central coast of Cuba. I mean, the ocean is just the most extraordinary, beautiful place, and we know so little about it. Oh,
yeah. And it's a huge source of inspiration for so many people for so many different reasons. And for you, so you live by the ocean. You're already inspired by the ocean. And you were inspired by plastic because of its pretty colors, and then finding out what it really means. Those pretty colors are pretty toxic. You created the Plastic Pollution Coalition. So how did that come about?
Well, so I'm a co-founder. We were originally 4. And for me, my personal journey towards that came from, well, first of all, Captain Charles Moore sounding the alarm. He created Algalita and has his ship, his sailboat, the Algeta. He just was yelling as loud as he could, and I started seeing little blips about him in magazines. He just started showing up on my radar.
Can you just tell the audience what he discovered, just so that people know?
He basically was on his way back from Hawaii, and he motored through a kind of doldrum section in the Pacific Ocean, which actually took him through the northeastern Pacific Gyre, and it was full of plastic. And he named it the Great Pacific Garbage Patch. I'm not sure if he actually would be the person who takes credit for naming it that. I think there have been a couple other people who have called it that as well, perhaps prior to Charlie. And he's a very humble person. So But he started talking about it, and I learned about it, and I think it also came about from artists, from photographers like Susan Middleton and Chris Jordan, both taking photographs of lace and albatross, adolescent lace and albatross carcasses with their stomachs, desiccated carcasses with their stomach, their cavities, body cavities filled with plastic and recognizable plastic. I mean, Bic lighters, toothbrushes, barrettes, toys, bottle caps, toothpaste caps, all kinds of things that we use every day. And with, in a very, I think, thoughtless and careless way, because most people have no idea that this is happening. But clearly, plastic has no boundaries. It's getting out into all of our lakes and rivers and streams and the ocean. And everything runs downstream to the ocean through our gutters, etc. And we are creating a disaster that is, exponentially far larger than the BP oil spill, which is still an ongoing issue, to have a platform that's, leaking and, gushing all of this oil. I mean, we're having a disaster like that on a daily basis in the way that the entire world, the global world, uses single-use and disposable plastic, and the way that we don't really have real recycling for it, because a lot of it cannot be recycled. So I also think that recycling is not really a solution. It may be a small component of the solution, but in my opinion, the real solution is to turn off the source, to stop it at the source, and that means making conscious decisions in our daily life and at our place of work, in our businesses, at our schools, to purchase packaging and products that do not come in this kind of packaging. And I realize this is like the most utterly enormous challenge to ask people to address, but just over the course of my life, I saw more and more plastic. First, it was just, some plastic bags or a baggie or something that had blown in the ocean. But now I see so much, I can't pick it all up. And really, do we want to leave a world? I mean, I feel like a lot of the language and the teaching and stuff that we do right now is to encourage our children to go clean this stuff up. I mean, honestly, that's not the solution. Turn a bunch of our children and future generations into garbage pickers on the beach and in our environment. I mean, clearly it needs to be cleaned up, but at the same time, how will we ever clean it up if we continue to create these enormous amounts of it? So to me, really, the idea of cleanup is a kind of smoke and mirrors game, or it's one of those like little, cup games.
Yeah, the shell game, yeah.
Shell game. And there are a lot of organizations that are backed by industry, and they put money towards this idea of cleanup and funding cleanup days and recycling days, etc. But, what's the reality there? The reality is most places in the world have no infrastructure to recycle things. Of the 7 different kinds of plastic that we use, and number 7 is actually just other. So it's a whole bunch of different kinds of plastic, including bioplastics, plant-based plastics. How much of that actually can be taken back and shredded or melted or reformed? It's very, very little. I think it's only 2 kinds of plastic that you can actually do that with.
Wow.
So the messaging is not in keeping with the reality.
Yes. Yes, it's greenwashing when you have these people doing this, promoting beach cleanups, when we're just cranking this stuff out like there's no limit. And so with your Plastic Pollution Coalition, from what I understand, and I want you to elaborate on this, you have the science behind it, you have artists behind it, you have the nonprofit entities behind it, and it's a big communications vehicle, because that's clearly the problem, is that the word is not getting out what we're actually doing. It's ubiquitous. Plastic is everywhere, and we just think it's okay because it's there, but it's not. So how do you guys organize yourselves? Because you're part of that. I like to say it, you're in the kitchen sink of stakeholders in our industry. Science, nonprofits, artists. You've all been thrown into like this amorphous mass of a stakeholder group, and yet you guys are really kicking some butt. So please elaborate.
Thanks. And it's, not, it's because we've grown into an international movement. So when we first created Plastic Pollution Coalition, the idea was, how do we create a kind of common messaging and a place where everybody can be connected, as opposed to how, for example, the nonprofit world, sadly, in my opinion, generally works, which is it's siloed. There'll be a lot of small local organizations. Many of them will be repeating the same thing that other organizations are doing. And sadly, they'll all be in competition with each other for the same funding. And what we've attempted to do, and I hope that we are having success in doing, is to bring together a lot of different stakeholders, and not only other nonprofits and organizations, but also businesses. So businesses that are either interested in trying to reduce their plastic footprint, or they're concerned about the issue, and they want to learn more about it, or they are actually producing a product which is an alternative product, or a product that can, basically a product that can be used instead, or is, potentially innovative in some way, or less toxic, or can truly be taken back and reused in some way. So we have a lot of different, we brought a lot of different folks to the table, but we have about 60 notable coalition members, and those include everyone from, the usual suspects, and that would mainly be professional surfers, Kelly Slater, Jerry Lopez, the Malloy brothers, who are also filmmakers, Jenny Kalbach, who's a world champion stand-up competitive paddleboarder, Chanel Slottick, who is a professional snowboarder, and then other groups, for example, like Keep Abreast Foundation and Non-Toxic Revolution, Environmental Working Group, the Breast Cancer Fund, lesscancer.org, Conservation International, Algolita, just so many different groups. And then everyone from small groups that are working, for example, on turtle habitat restoration in Costa Rica or Panama, to these really large groups like the Girl Scouts of America and the Teamsters. So we've been able to bring a lot of different players to the table. And again, it also includes music festivals, a lot of musicians, really wonderful musicians like Ben Harper and Jack Johnson, Jackson Brown, Maroon 5, Jeff Bridges, who's an actor and a musician, Bonnie Raitt, David Crosby, the band Social Distortion, Loudon Wainwright III, Jonathan Richman, Bette Midler. She's also, a performer and a singer and an actress, and just really, really wonderful people. And I'm totally honored and proud because the author Margaret Atwood just joined our coalition as a coalition member. Yeah, I love her. And so, and then chefs. So Joanna Moore, who's a chef here in Venice and had this wonderful restaurant for many years called Ashe, Akasha Richmond, who has Akasha in Culver City, Mario Batali, who has 18 different restaurants in his Batali Bastianich restaurant group. And with them, we've done a pilot project where they changed their protocol to stop automatically offering people plastic straws, to still carry straws, but only make them available upon request. In the same way, Ted Turner, his Ted Montana Grill restaurants, they located a straw making company called Aardvark Straws that makes straws out of paper, and they branded them and use them for all of their restaurants. So they're only serving a paper straw that is biodegradable. And it is compostable as well, because that can be kind of a misnomer to say that. And then Alice Waters, who created Chez Panisse, and she's really, a seminal chef and restaurateur who has influenced and cultivated so many wonderful chefs and culinary experiences for people around the United States and in other parts of the world. She really brought this kind of Mediterranean California cuisine together. She has been one of our most wonderful supporters. She was one of the first restaurants that stopped serving bottled water to people and serves filtered, still, and carbonated water. And she's working very hard to figure out how to have as little disposable plastic as possible in her kitchen. One of the big challenges, I think, in the food industry and catering and hospitality is plastic saran wrap. And in the same way, a big challenge for agriculture is all of this giant agricultural plastic that we use, plastic sheeting, that a lot of people put pesticides on, and that becomes toxic waste and gets buried in landfills. So that is not recycled. If people are under the impression somehow that any of this stuff is recycled, it's not. But so that said, I mean, that's a pretty good overview of the notable coalition members who work with us. I'm also really proud because we started a project last year, a pilot project with Bonnaroo, which is the largest music festival in the United States. And it's called Refill Revolution. And what we did last year, we're scaling up and doubling for this year, which is they offered branded stainless steel reusable cups with a little strap and a carabiner to people they sold out after a day and a half. Hopefully they'll last longer this year, but they ordered more. But they sold them with the first beer at point of sale. And then every beer that you bought for the 4 days of the festival after that was $1 off. So they also incentivized a behavior change that they're going for. And so far the response to that has been really, really positive. So,
these are amazing initiatives, and it's just changing people's behavior and just recognizing what's going on, because we don't know all these things. It's not mainstream news. If you're following non-mainstream news, you get to see this stuff, but you won't see it on mainstream news. And so it's going out, grassroots going out, and it's going out through the people in the arts, the culinary arts, the visual arts, the performing arts. Artists are becoming a huge force to be reckoned with when it comes to changing our behavior and turning our world around. So I in my little corner of the world, being in the dive industry, I believe that we are a force, and I think that we don't recognize our own power as being, as one of my friends calls it, the canaries in the coal mine, because we have our eyes in the water all the time. We see what's going on, and we can be a major force for change. Right. And so my question to you is, I'd like to just walk through some of the different aspects of the industry, and if you could just provide me with some ideas as to what we can do. So I'm going to get my cheaters on here, and okay, let's start off with reducing our plastic footprint with shows. You know, that's one of the big ways we market our product. How do we do that?
So with you mean like a dive?
Like a dive show, yeah. Like I was just at Beneath the Sea, and they're doing their best, but what could they? I'm not pointing out Beneath the Sea, but I'm pointing out all the dive shows.
Right. So the main things, and I'd love to say something else about diving, because we've actually been working with some divers on an island, the most western island in Greece, in the island archipelagos of Greece, in the Ionian Sea. We've been working on an island called Kefalonia. It's personal for me because it's the birth island of my maternal grandfather. But we've been working with a couple dive groups there, and they've been sending divers out with us last summer. We're going to do it again this May. We'll be there to do a cleanup of a bay that we discovered called Assos Bay, and then also they did a cleanup with us of a more local bay right in Argostoli in the town. And I mean, there are tons of plastic garbage there. What's so interesting is you can be standing on the side of the water or at the beach with people who are buying things in plastic cups with plastic tops and plastic straws, sipping out of them, talking to you, even though this is the stuff that we're going to find when we go down with the divers and are pulling it out. Or we find it washed up in the sea caves on this island. So this is a project we've been working on for a few years. And this will be my 4th year working on the project. But I definitely had a different experience. I was just wearing snorkeling gear, but we're working with these divers last year. It was really, really eye-opening. I think it was, they said that they were really happy to work with us because they're seeing it all the time, even though they're taking tourists out to these beautiful dive spots and beautiful beaches. So I would say the first thing you could do for a dive centric conference, is make a real commitment, the organizers of that conference, to aim to do a zero waste conference. And I know that that's a tall order, what I'm suggesting, but the idea is maybe if they have some sponsors, they could, and it would take a little premeditated, organization here, but have reusable stainless steel cups made and bottles that are either incorporated into the ticket price for each person coming into the dive conference, so that each person's given a cup, again, with a carabiner and this little neoprene strap on the edge of it to hold it. You click it on your purse, you click it on your jeans, you click it on your backpack or your man bag or whatever you have, your dive bag, and just have this with you. So it would either be a cup or a reusable bottle. And then all of the vendors who come into the dive conference are requested to bring their beverages in larger containers and know that they're going to be filling these containers for people. And you maybe incentivize it by giving people a little break in the price of each drink that they buy, or you don't, but they're using a reusable cup, and you have all of a sudden almost zero waste at the end of the conference. You just, hundreds and hundreds of people or thousands of people buying plastic bottled waters, etc. Sometimes that's a problem for people because they're making money by selling those beverages. So you have to figure out a way that works for the vendors. But if you're putting a conference together, you can ask the vendors to do whatever you'd like them to do. It's kind of the same as being a musician or an actor and having a writer that you send ahead of you and say, you can be the kind of actor who says, I need to have 20 Fiji plastic water bottles in my dressing room set up in a diamond pattern, and I only eat red M&Ms. Or you can be a person who says, I don't eat or drink out of plastic. I would, invite you to please, provide me with water, filtered water in a pitcher, or water in glass bottles, please. Or, could you please give me a couple real plates and some real cutlery and real napkins, because that's what I'd like to use in my little. And we've had a lot of musicians who've done stuff like that. We've had musicians who've saved 58,000 plastic water bottles in 1 year of touring. But then they carry 2 of their own filtration machines, and they have their crew has jerry-rigged them up so they can hook them up to hoses, and it filters the water, and they refill all these reusable stainless steel bottles that are labeled for everybody in the band and everybody in the crew. And somebody does it for sound check, and somebody refills them during the show, and if there's an intermission, at the intermission of the show, and voila, they've done a show and not created a ton of waste. It may be different for people out in the audience. Jack Johnson is very particular about it. He invites his audiences to bring reusable bottles. They sell reusable bottles that are non-plastic, and they brand them. Bonnie Raitt sells a reusable steel bottle. Crosby, Stills and Nash sells a reusable steel bottle. A lot of musicians are doing it, and they've added it to their merch, or they add bamboo reusable utensils to their merch. And it gives you tools that you can use.
Yeah. So these types of things that are happening in the music industry, and music industry is very, very much helping to move things in a positive direction. We could start to apply these to our own dive shows and events. And I know that there is a big movement to make shows much more sustainable. Oh my gosh, look at that baby. Oh, I love kitty cats. Oh. They always find the hot spots. They know we're talking serious stuff, so they have to be here. Well, I want to know about, so we've talked about shows and events that people are actually doing zero waste events. It's a path. So let's look next at suppliers. What can suppliers do, like resorts and liveaboards and dive operators? There's got to be some simple ways to reduce their single use.
I think, again, the same thing. What we do, for example, for the project in Greece, is I went to a hardware store and I bought a big steel it almost looks like a milk, like a giant container for milk or for olive oil or wine, and it's got a spigot on the lower part of it. We used it for 9 beach cleanups last year. And we fill it up with filtered water or water from a part of the island where we know the water's good. Some of the island have old pipes, like in the main town, it's a little bit more of a problem for people. But we fill it up with water that we know is good, and then we add ice to it, and we take it down to the beach when it's 100 degrees, and just set it up on like a little crate, a wooden crate, and then we bring steel cups with us and steel bottles. We've had some of the companies on the island sponsor steel cups and little steel bottles for all the kids that were involved in the projects we did. And you just provide something, or you provide some steel cups that people just can drink out of and then put back on top of the cooler. So I would say every dive school and every dive business should have something like that they load up in the back of their van when they're taking everybody out with, all the tanks and all the gear and the wetsuits and everything that they're carrying. That's an easy enough thing just to you're a strong girl, you're a strong guy, you load it in the back or you get someone to help you if you bought a really big one, and then you just bring it out with you. And as long as you have some ice in it, it helps it. You could probably wrap something around it to insulate it a little bit better because they're not particularly insulated. And you don't have to use stainless steel ones. I just like using the stainless steel ones because it makes the water really cold and fresh. I mean, you can use the plastic igloo one, but the whole idea is to get away from the plastic. So.
Right. But that's a step in the right direction rather than just having a whole bunch of single-use water bottles and just start passing them out to everybody on the dive boat or whatever.
You could pre-fill, you could brand, you could either buy plain or brand some stainless steel bottles for your organization, for your company, with your logo on them or fishies or whatever you want to put on it. Make it cute, make it cool. And then pre-fill a whole bunch of those and put those in the cooler. It's going to make the cooler heavier, but we'll put those in the cooler so they're icy cold and you've got a bottle for each person. Or, if people want to buy them because you branded them and it's part of what you're doing, at the end they can buy their bottle if they want to, or you can include it in the price of the dive. I mean, they're not that expensive. So it just depends on, who your clientele is. If it's a more high-end resort or company or group that you're taking out, it's probably easier to encourage them to go along with something like that. And I think it is also important to have a simple explanation of why. Like on our website, we have our one sheet, and it's in like 6 or 7 different languages. There's just PDFs you can download, but I'm holding it up so you can see it.
Oh, yes. Refuse.
Yes. So what we did originally, our first campaign, and it's still our campaign, is we took the 4 R's, or the 3 R's, reduce, reuse, recycle, and we added the 4th R to the front, which is we ask people whenever possible to refuse single-use plastic. Ask if you can may I have that? Hi, I'd like a margarita, no straw. Hi, I'd like an iced tea or lemonade, no straw. Please don't put any plastic in my drink. Oh, I like straws. I carry my own reusable stainless steel or glass straw. Little things that you can do that are encouraging. And then the other side of the page is all about just trying to empower people to understand how you can begin. So
now, these are, I mean, it's very simple. This process of starting to eliminate these single use, it's very simple. It's just a matter of us doing it. And I was thinking about, why do we not do it? And I did come across a lot of one of the main reasons is we believe that it's cheaper, because labor cost is significant. It's cheaper for us to use single use and throw it away than to have something that we can reuse. So that means we're stocking lots of throwaway plastic because we don't have to wash anything. Now, in your experience and because you do what you do, is there a significant savings in switching from plastic to non-reusable? There is a significant?
It's an initial investment. I mean, you don't have to buy a stainless steel bottle. You could just take a glass bottle from some beverage that you bought and put some cool stickers on it or your name on it and use that 1,000 times until it gets broken. I've broken a couple glass straws, unfortunately, even though I love them. So my preference really for traveling is to carry stainless steel because I just feel that I have less a chance of breakage. That said, it's heavier. So, it's just really, it's personal taste. And then reteaching your brain just to get in the habit of bringing a reusable bag. I carry a little tiny micro Chico bag. It's called like a mini Chico bag with me. It folds up super small. I actually kind of want to grab it and show you. Can I walk away for a second?
Yeah, I want to see this.
Here. This is the bag that I carry with me tucked in the corner of my purse.
That's so tiny.
Yeah, it's called it's Chico Bags makes it, and it's called like a mini or a micro Chico bag, and it folds out, and I always have it with me because it fits in the corner of my purse. So, I mean, this is a really cool company too. They're in Northern California. The owner's super nice, and people can also brand stuff like this for their company and have little things like this that you carry with you. It's super easy, and that would be a cool thing to have. Beautiful blue things like this at a dive event. I'm folding it back up. It's kind of like, loading your suitcase. Your sleeping bag.
That's incredible how small it goes.
It's tiny. I forget I have it. It also comes in really pretty colors like blue and a kind of purple eggplant color. And then I always carry this with me too. And this is from a company that's part of the coalition. It's called To Go Wear. And it's bamboo utensils. It's a knife, and they let me bring this on planes. I've had people go, they let you bring that on planes, but it's not like a really sharp knife. And a spoon, a fork, and chopsticks. And then I've augmented it by adding a stainless steel straw. And so I carry this with me always. And I use them all the time. And I'll take my nieces and nephews out, and they'll want, a frozen yogurt, and voila. I've got, one of them can use the spoon, one can use the fork, and I can use the chopsticks, and we can all have frozen yogurt together without taking plastic utensils. So I love that, and that's really cool. That also has a little carabiner on it. And then these are stainless steel cups. There's a lot of different companies that make them and different kinds that you can get. This one says Plastic Pollution Coalition on it. And it's also got I refuse disposable plastic on it.
I love it.
Got double messaging. And then, for example, this is one of our stainless steel bottles. But and this is just etched. It's not paint on it, which I think is really cool. And the top is also steel. This one's steel and bamboo. I think it was a prototype, but the ones we make now are just all steel. And it's got just a silicone O-ring to help it stay shut. And these are all just great. Really simple. It's basically like having a camping kit. So here's, why doesn't every dive shop sell a basic, reduce your plastic footprint, or, have a light plastic footprint on the ocean, or whatever the name of it would be, and sell that like a basic kit that you, when you go diving, so that everybody just had it. Maybe it's a t-shirt too. We have some really cool t-shirts that say, in a kind of distressed 70s writing, plastic is washed up.
It's brilliant. I love it.
I actually think plastic is washed up. And again, like I said, this is where I and the plastic industry agree. Plastic is a very valuable important material. But why are we using it in an irresponsible way?
Yes, why are we throwing it away when it is so valuable? It's truly valuable. We shouldn't be burning it in terms of oil, and we shouldn't be throwing it away in the form of the 7 different types of plastics, of which most can't be recycled to begin with. Well,
and honestly, the thing is, because of the way it impacts human health, and even babies in utero in the United States, Environmental Working Group did a study of umbilical cord blood of 11 newborn babies and found they all had over 220 different chemicals in their umbilical cord blood. That included phthalates and bisphenols and flame retardants and a bunch of chemicals that are associated with plastics. And those chemicals in babies have been linked to all different kinds of things. They've been linked to shortened anogenital distance, smaller penis size, to feminization of boys getting breasts, to early menses in girls, and to lower IQ and attention deficit disorder. Like, why are we poisoning our babies? Why are we creating plastic beaches and plastic oceans that they're going to have to either figure out how to try and clean up, which at this point is kind of impossible, or it's going to be, it affects everything. If people depend on seafood for their protein, that seafood is ingesting plastic. That we're finding microplastics in bivalves, in oysters, in mussels, in gills of crab, in crab intestine, in lobsters, in fish. We're finding this stuff in everything, and it's coming back to us. And excuse me for saying this, but literally we are pooping where we eat. And it's in our environment on land and in our environment in the ocean. And it's just, if people think that the ocean, I think the problem is people have always thought the ocean was so vast that we could throw things away in it for thousands of years, which is what human beings have done. And it was so big, it would just go away. But at this point, it's coming back to us because there are all these different, moving 11 gyre systems in the ocean. All of the gyres, the major gyres that have been studied, have plastic in them. Almost all ocean water samples are coming back with plastic in them. We've created a disaster, and it's coming back to bite us on the butt. And us ocean people are the first line of defense. We're the first line, we're the canaries, and we're the first line of defense. We're the first line of people who say, oh my God, let a light go on, and make a connection between the crap that you see washed up when you go on a dive, or ripping off part of a coral reef, or tangled up, or that a hermit crab is using a bottle cap as its house now, or a Coke can or something. We should be the first ones who say, oh my gosh, this is totally wrong, and I'm not going to be supportive. I refuse to contribute to a system that perpetuates this. And we can do that by making smarter choices. But it all comes from first becoming educated and raising awareness, and then also setting an example. So, with dive programs and dive conferences, it's a perfect way to set an example. And if you produce multiple conferences per year, it is really worth it to look for ways to invest in reusable things that you can use every year, or turn them into something that people might want to purchase, or could be incorporated into their ticket price, and they go home with it. And you've sent everyone home with a starter kit of how to live a little more plastic free. So
it's like we think there's an away, there's no away. And with plastic, we think, well, it'll break down. Well, it never actually truly breaks down. It breaks down enough so that it's so small that we can't even clean it out, and it's ending up in our food and our water systems. I know it's in some of the face washing products that we buy, and the toothpaste.
There's microbeads in our whitening toothpaste, in our facial scrubs, and a number of different beauty products. They are so microscopically small that they wash right down the drain and straight into our waterways and oceans. There are no filters that are fine enough to catch these things. And we used to use natural materials for scrubs, like sugar or salt or apricot pits ground up, sand. And somehow, at some point, somebody got this brilliant idea to switch to microplastic. It was obviously just like Frankenstein concept. And so we've got microbeads from those kind of microbeads. And we also have microbeads, which are the larger pre-consumer plastic nurdles. And those are washing into the water all over the world. And again, they look like little fish eggs. So they're being ingested by the entire marine chain. Then there's also microplastics from plastics breaking into smaller bits. Like some of the bags in this piece behind me is about 20 years old. And some of the bags in it, just depending on the chemical makeup of the bag, have started to fissure and break into smaller pieces. So I actually originally thought that plastic was ephemeral and biodegradable, but it turns out it's not. It just breaks into smaller bits. And then you see stuff all the time washed up on beaches, or when you're diving, or when you're in the ocean, or you're snorkeling or swimming. You'll see bits of chewed plastic bags and things that animals have already gotten a hold of and mistaken it for food. And they're chewing on it. 68% of turtle necropsies have plastic in their intestines. So turtles are mistaking plastic for algae and seaweed and jellyfish and their normal food sources that they eat. They are mistaken. A white plastic bag looks a lot like a jellyfish when it's in the water. And yeah, I mean, it's really, really, I was trying to think, there was one other kind of microplastics. I've just been learning all of this over the last 2 years. Oh yeah, there's microfibers, and they're washing out of all of our clothes. So like I'm wearing a cotton t-shirt, but it's a little bit stretchy in the neck, which means it probably has some kind of synthetic or polyester, in it for the elastic. And that, every time I wash it, is probably releasing microfibers, which our washing machines are not equipped to catch. And you have to remember, a lot of people in the world don't even use washing machines to wash their clothes. So all of these micro synthetic fabrics that we're wearing, and I know there are a lot of people who think that they're doing a really great job by highlighting that we're going to use ocean plastic to make clothing. I don't think it's such a great idea. I really don't. And I think they should really question what they're doing. And it's going to be important to add filters to our washing machines, because this stuff is just escaping. And that's the the highest quantity of microplastic that people are finding right now in studies of microplastic is microfibers. Oh, and on top of that, all those microfibers, pre-consumer plastic nurdles, microbeads in the beauty products, and broken down plastic bits have a quality to them where they're oleophilic. It's part of the plastic, I guess, the carbon in the plastic. It attracts other carbon to its surface. And so they attract other persistent organic pollutants that stick to the surface. So like one tiny little plastic nurdle, pre-consumer plastic pellet, can have up to 1 million times the POPs, the persistent organic pollutants, attached to the surface. And that includes DDT and pharmaceuticals and pesticides and flame retardants and everything that, again, runs down into the ocean. Can be stuck to the surface of the stuff, or in a lake, or in a river. And again, they look like fish eggs, so they're being ingested by the marine chain. And the big fish eat the little fish, and the bigger fish eat them. And voila, there's your dinner plate. Bon appetit.
Wow. So this is so huge, but we can be part of the change, because we are voices for the ocean if we choose to be. And we can start making choices and advise our customers to make these choices. I was watching Downton Abbey, and then they had this whole little backgrounder to Downton Abbey, and it was about what it was like to be in the early 1900s, and what it was like to be a really good housekeeper for one of these big houses. And basically, a really good housekeeper had virtually no waste. And there were people that came by, and they would pick up your tin, and they would pick up your paper, and they would just pick up everything. So at the end of the day, you had very, very, very little waste. And the people who would pick it up, they would pay you for it, because all these resources were so valuable back then. Well, the value hasn't changed. It's just that we think it's just a throwaway. It's a change in mindset. Right. So my hope, and I'm just throwing out there, my hope is that we go back to the early 1900s, when we really start to value our resources, and that everything cannot be thrown away. The zero footprint is the sign of a really sophisticated society, like it was with Downton Abbey.
Yeah, or look, it may have been because we weren't really full on into the Industrial Revolution yet, and plastic and what would be the right word? The all pervasiveness of plastic really is a result of World War II. And, factories that had started manufacturing things that were used in World War II needed to be rebooted to make something else when the war ended, so that there would still be jobs and these factories could still be useful for something. And I think that is how a lot of the original things that were made out of plastic came about, like combs and eyeglasses and things that we still make out of plastic. And that was to replace things that originally only wealthy people were able to afford, because they were made out of bone, or they were made out of ivory or wood, or something that was a more expensive material. So plastic is a very new problem, but it has exponentially catapulted itself into becoming a really enormous disaster without most of us realizing it. And really, most people that I meet still think that eating or drinking something out of plastic means it's clean and it's hygienic and it's etc. That was a tough day for me when I had to take all the Tupperware out of the cabinet and figure out how I was going to replace it. But I replaced it with a lot of these vintage old, I found them at thrift stores, old refrigerator containers that are kind of rounded and squared, and they're measured, and half pint, and quart, and different size containers, and then they have a glass lid that goes down. And they also make ones that have plastic lids that snap down, and I think if you don't fill them up all the way so your food isn't touching the plastic and you don't reheat with the plastic on top of it, then that's probably okay. I also use ceramic bowls, and I put a saucer on top of them, totally like a granny house. Sometimes I use a product I found. There's a couple different companies that make it. One is called Abeego, Abeego, and they take kind of thin cotton muslin, and they soak it in beeswax, and then it comes cut in different shapes, and you can lay it over the surface of something, like over the surface of this cup, and you put your down on it, and it heats the edges, and then it'll form down over it. So it's kind of like a natural version of saran wrap, but you use it hundreds and hundreds of times, and it's not plastic. So I am always on the lookout for cool ideas and solutions and alternatives. And I don't think we should think of it so much as going back to a time before plastic. I think we should think of it as, this is a wake-up call right now. What choices and what things are we able to change? How can we make a commitment towards thinking of things with more value so that we use things in a reusable, refillable way? And how can we reduce our exposure to and support of this kind of packaging, because it's not good for us or our health or our children or our grandchildren.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Wow. Well, it seems so overwhelming, the problem, but we have to start somewhere. And being in the position where we're at, where we are by the ocean, in the ocean, it's all about the ocean. It's all about water. We're water people. We're in the perfect position to make the change, to tell people about this stuff, and be the change ourselves. And people will go, oh, why do you have a steel cup, and why do you use a steel straw, and you have your own to go cutlery, and it's an opportunity for us, as you say, to be able to even sell this in our retail shops, and to encourage this. We could really be a big part of the shift in mindset from where we are as the throwaway society to one that truly values its resources and is not destroying what we have left.
What we love and what we want to protect, because it's so good.
Yeah. Well, I know you have a ton of great stuff on your website, and we're going to include that in our resources, all the wonderful things you have, and you've provided some tremendous insight into how we can change our throwaway ways into something that's really productive and really impactful, that just ripples out to everybody that we come in contact with.
Lori, we're stewards of the ocean. It is our responsibility to really begin to we screwed up. So it's time for us to wake up and look around and think about what we value. And we live on a planet, it's an ocean planet. We live on a blue planet, and we need to protect what we have there, because the ocean is what makes our whole planet function in a healthy way. And we're choking the ocean and everything that lives in it on plastic garbage and chemicals and plastic. And it's really time to step up, for all of us to step up and take responsibility and be good ocean stewards.
Yeah. I think that there should be a whole plastic pollution part of the open water certification, to explain to people how critical it is for us to just to shift over to not using all this disposable material, that it's just not sustainable, and we're part of the problem. This is how we can be part of the solution.
Let me know how we can help.
Yes, absolutely. We're all over that. Listen, Thank you so much, Dianna. It's been such a great talk with you, and truly appreciate all of your insight. It's for some people who are participating in this, they're going to be a little bit shocked by how bad it is. But there are ways forward, and we're part of the solution. So thank you for helping us add that R: reduce, reuse, recycle, and refuse.
Yes.
Okay.
First.
Well, listen, you have a great day. Thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you, Lori. Take care.
You too. Take care. Bye-bye.